So a lot of you have been asking me to do filming locations for Last American Virgin, so that's what we're doing today. But I have to warn you that a lot of those locations have either been torn down completely and no longer exist, or they've just heavily been remodeled. There are a few that still look somewhat the same. We're gonna look at all the locations, the ones that are still there, and I'm gonna show you where the other ones used to be. So let's get started. Today we're taking a look at filming locations for the 1982 raunchy teen comedy, Last American Virgin. Let's go see what we can find. Now, the movie starts with a crane shot looking at the Hollywood sign and then panning down over Hollywood, kind of focusing on the intersection of Cahuenga and Hollywood Boulevard. And as the camera first starts to pan down, one of the first things we see is this 7-Eleven on the corner of Cahuenga and Yucca Street. The 7-Eleven's still there and looks pretty much the same as it did. As the camera continues to pan down and move towards Hollywood Boulevard, we also see this antenna right here. And then just to the right of the antenna, we see these two buildings. In the movie, that building on the left says Woolworth on it. The camera then stops on the intersection of Cahuenga and Hollywood, and we see this building, which still has that sign on top. In the movie, it's a sign for Security Pacific Bank. Across the street from the Security Pacific building, what's now Popeye's Chicken on the corner, we see this building in the lower right corner of that shot. And thankfully, it's a very unique building and very easy to match up with what we see in the movie. If you look really hard in the movie, you can even see this sign. It's a little bit hard to see now because the trees are blocking it. Right here where this newer shopping center is, right on the corner of Western and Hollywood Boulevard, this is where Vincenzo's Pizza used to be, which stood in as Pink Pizza, the restaurant that Gary worked at. Now, as far as I can tell, Pink Pizza would have been somewhere over on this side of the shopping center, and then over here would have been a Pioneer Chicken, which you can see when Gary's pulling out of the parking lot. Now, like I said, Pink Pizza would have been somewhere over here, and as Gary's pulling out, you can see the arches of the Pioneer Chicken that would have been located somewhere right over here, possibly where this Chase Bank now is. Now, absolutely everything at this intersection has changed. The buildings across the street that we see when Gary's pulling out are different as well. So how can we tell that this is the right spot? Well, when Gary's pulling out of the parking lot, across the street in the distance, you can see a red brick building. And that red brick building is one of the few things that's still here. It's kind of hard to see now because this newer shopping center with the Marshalls blocks it. But if we come over to this side, there it is. And it completely matches up to what we see in the movie. All those windows match up perfectly. Thankfully, that building is still here because otherwise we'd have nothing to tell us that this is the right intersection. After leaving Pink Pizza, we see Gary getting onto the 101 freeway right here, and he's heading right towards that freeway sign, which in the movie reads Barham, Lankershim, and Ventura Boulevard. As you can see, it's a bit different these days. It now reads Barham, Universal Studios, Lankershim, and then Ventura Boulevard would be after that. Those apartment buildings on the right side of the freeway are now a bit covered up by the trees, but other than that, this shot looks exactly like it did in the movie. So just to give you a little bit better idea, Gary would have been traveling down Cahuenga right here, moving right past the Ford Theater, which is right here on my left. He moves past this bridge, which is where I was just standing, taking the shot of the freeway, and then he gets onto the freeway using this on-ramp. Where this shopping center now is, this used to be the Golden Bird, the diner that they all hang out at. Now everything here looks completely different. The Golden Bird would have been over here on this side of the parking lot. This whole building wouldn't have been here, and this building wouldn't have been here. Now in the movie, you can see that there's a building next door to the Golden Bird. You can see it multiple times, especially when they're coming in and out of the front door. And on that building, it said Oriental Silk. And there was a neon sign right in the front that also said Oriental Silk. Now this is extremely frustrating. When I first started scouting this area on Google Maps, trying to find things that were still the same, I noticed that that building that said Oriental Silk was still located next door, still said Oriental Silk on the front, and even still had the neon sign that said Oriental Silk, the exact same one that you see in the movie. But when I arrived today, I found that that building's been torn down. I really hate when this happens. It's so frustrating, but like I said, if you go to Google Maps, you can still see it, and that tells us that we are in the right spot. Now, when they're coming in and out of the Golden Bird, you can see a house located behind the building. You can no longer see it because of this part of the shopping center that's there. But if we go behind the shopping center, that house is still there. The roof line has changed a little bit. It looks like they've added on to the house a bit, but this is the house that you see. So right now where I'm standing, I would have been inside the Golden Bird. And like I said, this building wouldn't have been here. You would have seen that house. This building wouldn't have been here. You would have seen the Oriental Silk building that used to be just on the other side of this structure. And right here in front of me would have been the front door to the Golden Bird. The building directly across the street can be seen through the window when they're sitting inside the restaurant. And then the building right next door can be seen in another shot. Luckily, the design of these buildings is really unique, so we're able to still match them up. This right here was Gary's house, and a lot of aspects of this house still look really similar to how they did at the time of filming, like the windows. The windows still look exactly the same, but unfortunately you can't see much of the house anymore because of all the trees and bushes in front of it. Now, probably one of the most famous scenes to take place here at this house is when they bring the girls back here. And then a short time after that, Gary's parents come home and they all come running out and they get into the station wagon that would have been parked right here in front of the house. And when they're getting ready to pull away from the house, we see David come running out of the house in his underwear. He comes running down that path right there and then gets into the station wagon and they drive off. Towards the end of the movie, we see Gary walking down the sidewalk right past that fence. It would have been a white picket fence at the time. He sneaks up to the house and then sneaks inside to take the stereo to go pawn it to get some money. A bit after that, we see him walking down the sidewalk, pretending to come home from the ski trip. As he moves past the house, his dad is right here in the driveway washing the car, and Gary stands right here having a conversation with his mom and dad, but that window that we see behind them is now covered by this bush. All of the school scenes were filmed right here at Reseda High School. The bad news is the whole school is a construction zone right now. They're getting ready to remodel the entire school, and they're actually going to be tearing down a lot of the locations that we see in the movie. So for that reason, it was really hard for me to get some good video. I was able to get some photos. I was able to get a little video, but definitely not the quality of video that I would have liked to get. And what's really sad about that is this was probably my last chance to document these locations before they're gone forever. Right on the other side of this fence and blue tarp are the basketball courts that are located right in front of the gym, and that's where we see the boys having PE class in the movie. Now, if you can just imagine this area without the fences and tarps, it actually looks exactly like it did in the movie. Everything still matches up perfectly, but I was told that they're getting ready to tear down the gym, and soon this area will look nothing like it did in the movie. This is the lunch area where we see Gary and David having lunch while Gary's staring at Karen. Now, this entire area looks a lot different. They tore down those awnings a long time ago. But you can see right here, these are the walk-up lunch windows where we see David getting his multiple hamburgers. And Gary and David would have been sitting somewhere right over here with this building in the background behind them. Karen would have been sitting at a table somewhere right over here to my left, but this building directly in front of me is the building that you can see right behind Karen. Those doors right there are the ones that are in the center of that shot. Now, this area was already under construction and completely gated off, so it was really hard to get any footage of this area. But this is the parking lot where Gary parks his car when he brings Karen to school. Now, this building right over here on the other side of this tarped up fence, this is where Gary parks his car. And then over on this side, these are the buildings that are behind Karen while Gary's talking to her. I was happy to see that at least the hallways still look the same, at least for now anyways. I mean, I don't even know if this building will still exist in the near future. This is the Reseda High football field, and at the end of the movie, this is where Rick brings Karen, and he takes her into that booth right up there. And when Gary comes here trying to find Karen, he pulls the station wagon up and parks it right here next to the bleachers. As Gary's walking around trying to see if he can find Rick and Karen, we get a shot of him looking underneath the bleachers. He would have been standing right over there on the other side. Now, this is pretty much the exact shot, but it's just really hard to tell because everything's now covered in chain link fence. This was Karen's house, and a lot of things are different on this house, but there's actually quite a few things that are still the same. Like, for instance, that white shutter just to the left of the front door, that can actually be seen in the movie. And where this brick pillar is now with the address on it, that replaced the post that used to be there that had the address on it. And Karen's scooter would have been parked just to the right of that post where the car sits in the driveway today. When Gary's running up to the front of her house to let all the air out of the front tire of her scooter, which, by the way, probably isn't the best way to meet a girl that you have a crush on, but anyways, you can see the houses across the street, and unbelievably, this house appears to have the exact same garage door that it had almost 40 years ago. It's just been painted. And the house is currently for sale, so if you want to live in the last American Virgin neighborhood, hurry up and jump on this while you still can. Gary comes driving down the street right here, headed towards Karen's house as she's rolling her scooter out of the driveway. He stops his car right here and gets out and offers to give her a ride to school, making him look like the hero. Just a couple of blocks away from Karen's house is the house where they have the big party, where David ends up falling into the pool, and shortly after that we see David helping Gary over to his car, which would have been parked right over here. Now, the party house appears to be a completely different house. It appears that they knocked down the house that we see in the movie and built a newer, bigger house. However, the house that Gary's car is parked in front of is the same house that we see in the movie. It's kind of hard to see because these trees are now blocking it, but there's some stone planters underneath the window that can be seen in the movie, and they're still there today. Plus, the roof line is still exactly the same. We see Gary's car traveling down the street right here, and then it pulls up right in front of this building. One of the few locations from this movie that looks almost exactly the same. This was Carmela's apartment. Now, that apartment building to the right, that appears to be a completely different building, but Carmela's apartment is almost exactly the same with a few exceptions. We see Gary walk up those steps to Carmela's apartment, which is that one right there on the second floor. Once he realizes that she wants to party, we see him come running out, and he gets in the station wagon and he drives off, but he comes back later with his friends. This door right here on my right side, this was Carmela's apartment, and a short time later we see Gary, Rick, and David walking up these steps coming back to her place. We then see Carmela's sailor boyfriend walking down the street right here, walking right past this chain link fence. And after her sailor boyfriend comes home, we see them all come running out of the apartment. A few moments later, David comes running down these steps. He comes running right down this path and jumps in the car, and then we see them drive off down the street this way. Right there on the corner of Sunset and Western is where the boys come to pick up the call girl. Right here on this corner, she would have been leaning up against that lamppost right there. I'm sure this is a different lamppost. It's probably been updated, but same location. She would have been leaning up against this lamppost as Gary, Rick, and David come walking up to her, and you can see the Sunset Theater in the background behind them. I believe at the time it was a Pussycat Theater, but that's how we know that this is the right spot. And when the camera is turned around shooting the other way, you can see something that appears to be a supermarket, which is now a Target. The pool scene was filmed here at Birmingham High, just a couple miles away from Reseda High, the school where they shot all the actual high school scenes. Now, of course, some things have changed here at the pool. It's been updated, but for the most part, you can see it looks the same as it did in the movie. The scene actually starts with the boys over on that side soaking in the pool, and then Karen would have come walking alongside the pool and stopped to talk to them. And right over here is where those small bleachers were, where we see them all sitting, before all three boys get up and run and jump back in the pool. Towards the end of the movie, when they're all getting in the van, getting ready to leave for the ski trip, that was also filmed here at Birmingham High School, right here in front of this building. Now, it's kind of hard to tell because there's now a chain link fence in front of it that's covered in ivy, but they would have been parked right here, pulled out of the space, turned that way, and headed down through the parking lot. Notice that scoreboard down at the end of the parking lot on the other side of the fence. And actually, if we come over here, this side isn't covered with ivy, and you can see that the building still completely matches up with what we see in the movie. All those doors are in the exact same place. This is definitely, without a doubt, the right place. So what did we learn from watching The Last American Virgin? If you know somebody that's going to have a life-altering medical procedure, make sure you bring a small Christmas tree and a whole bag of oranges when visiting them in the hospital. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.